We started Culturally Speaking to indulge our curiosity about the way others live and a desire to inspire conversations about how we have far more in common than we realise.
Hey,
Hey, how's it going?
it's Friday, and
Yay.
I'm glad it's Friday. It's been a long week.
For a short week, right? We've had a 4-day working week this week. It's felt like
Yeah,
a long
I
week.
think it's because I was away on the weekend, so I think I'm just mentally exhausted by now. I'm looking forward to a local weekend.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I think I'm actually looking forward to a really I know I had a very London experience last week, like very British experience,
Yes,
but I'm actually looking forward to a nice low-key weekend.
we've got a very long travel list between you and I.
Indeed, but I feel like you and I like so many of the same places, but we've traveled to so many places individually.
Yeah,
Like,
I think we need to find like somewhere that either we've both been or we've both not been. So it's a new adventure.
yeah, my friend just sent me this book, actually in the post. It was like I'm really looking forward to reading it tonight in the bath. It's called like Catch Me If You Can, and it's like a travel series from a lady, detailing her travels. I'll share if it's good.
Yeah, yeah. I think now like the world's opening up. My appetite for traveling has come back. I don't really mind the flights, I love long haul flights, as you know. But speaking of travel, so today we are talking about immigration. I would say it's pretty woven into the fabric of British culture for many decades now, for as long as we can remember.
Well, when people think about British society, right, the thing we always
Mm,
hear is like it's a multicultural, tolerant society. That's the thing that I feel is like the message that underpins it. And the fabric of this
yeah.
society is made by the migrants of, that make up the fabric of British society.
Yeah, because I mean, the tolerant thing, we'll come back to the tolerant part of that statement later, but let's define immigration first, because I think maybe not all of our listeners are from places where it's as common.
Yeah.
So immigration is the international movement of people into a destination country of which they are not natives or where they do not possess citizenship in order to settle or reside there, especially as permanent residents or naturalized citizens, or to take up employment as a migrant worker or temporarily as a foreign worker. Now, there's a few particularly important terms I think we need to define. So, we've heard of asylum seeker and
Yeah.
refugee, and actually, they're quite different things based on the legal status of whatever country you end up in. So, an asylum seeker is someone who seeks safety from persecution or serious harm in a country other than their own and are awaiting a decision on the application for refugee status under whatever international and national instruments and legalities there are. And a note that I found slightly controversial, but very interesting, is that after Brexit, new rules were actually introduced through which the UK government can decide that an asylum claim is inadmissible. So before Brexit, we were adhering to something called the Dublin regulation. So I think
Hmm.
it's actually harder now
Yeah.
for people to be granted refugee status. Now, refugee is the next step of the process, basically. So this is someone who, owing to a well-founded fear of persecution for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or political opinions, is out of the country of their nationality and is unable or owing to such fear unwilling to avail themselves of the protection of their own country. And I was reading up some websites and blogs about this, and it's actually bloody difficult to become a
Yes.
refugee. And that process between being an asylum seeker and getting granted refugee status can take years,
And
within
I
which
think
you have no right to work or make money.
and I think this is something that really was brought home. I remember at school being taught the difference
Mm.
because the media use the words asylum seekers and refugees
Interchangeably.
in very inflammatory ways, don't they?
Yes, it's always got a negative connotation.
Yes. And I remember being taught the difference and people being really surprised that as an asylum seeker, firstly, the onus is on you to prove that you require protection. And secondly,
And
in that time, you can't work.
Apparently, it's your responsibility to do it as soon as.
Yes.
Otherwise, you can get prosecuted.
Yes.
For being illegal.
And if you think about, I mean, neither of us fortunately have, I don't think, any experience of fleeing a situation, unless you're going to tell me you're on the run.
Just dodgy situations and work socials.
That aside, neither of us fortunately did have any experience having to flee a country and arrive in a new one. But I mean, that's very stressful.
And people bring their infants with them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And another point is naturalization. So I think that became a very hot word after Brexit, right? A lot of our European friends would have had to decide if they wanted to do that. So naturalization is the granting by a state of its nationality to a non-national through a formal act on the application of the individual concerned. And on that note, I think there's an other category which I fall into because I never went through the naturalization process.
Right. Okay.
So for people listening, I was born and raised in Hong Kong before the handover, which was in 1997. So yes, I am not a Gen Z. But basically back then, what I believe happened was the British government wanted to encourage, obviously, keeping high potential, high earning, whatever, like high valued individuals. So my parents were given full British citizenship. And so by birth, I also got it. So I have the same status as someone who would have been born in the UK.
Yeah.
And this is different to some Hong Kong people who have the BNO status, which is no longer a thing. They stopped issuing them a while ago. BNO stands for British National Overseas. And I think the difference is around the right to work, the right to abode. Because even when I came over, I wasn't a resident because I hadn't been paying taxes and I hadn't been here long enough. So it took 5 years for me to get residency status, even though I was a citizen. But I believe for BNO holders, they needed visas to work, I think. So I can't think of many other people from like other countries who would have had the same status as people from Hong Kong, actually.
So I guess we could, going back in history a little while, we think about the waves of immigration to the UK. And I think if we think in modern times, because actually immigration has been happening, literally since the 17th century and earlier, right? In different ways because we've been conquered by different people, but and much earlier, sorry, I should say, but that was just kind of the date that stuck out. So when we think about the Commonwealth, what used to be the Empire, actually, rather than the Commonwealth, you did have people who had British citizenship. So I can talk to this, I guess, quite personally. So my grandmother had what you had.
Okay.
She had a British passport and the right to reside, and that's how she moved to the UK. But again, decades ago, we're talking back in the she must have got it in the 1960s, 1970s, because she had, she got it much earlier, but didn't use it to come to the UK until later. But that was not necessarily the same for everybody, right? Some people moved to the UK through schemes which encouraged migration or immigration. and then had to apply for citizenship and the right to remain, the indefinite right to remain, which is, I believe, what they call it now is, staying here for 5 years.
Yeah.
Laws go through various, and it's highly political, obviously, but immigration policy is something that is always a hot potato in any general
It is.
election here.
Yeah.
And laws change over time. There's always been questions about. I'll take, for example, just because we've seen a huge military display in the last couple of weeks, but the Gurkhas that fight in the British Army, but are they British nationals? Are they British subjects? Do they have the right for to have be British nationals? Does it make their families British nationals? That was always a point of consideration, as well as you mentioned your parents and their status, and therefore by birth you inherited it, right? But people that are married to British nationals and how that translates as well.
There's a 7-year thing, isn't there? Just to
I
make sure
believe
it's
that-
not a fraud.
Yeah.
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 Like the proposal with Sandra Bullock and what's his name? Ryan Reynolds. So I think worth mentioning as well is that multiculturalism actually comes in quite different ways. So you've been to the US. So actually in culture theory, you would call that a melting pot type of multiculturalism where everyone is American, And the theory, if you imagine a melting pot and you just chuck things in and they all melt together, the idea of that is that you become homogenous.
Yeah.
I remember going to kind of New York and I felt that, not necessarily a sense of animosity, but you really feel that either you're a New Yorker or you are not.
It's funny you say New York.
Yeah.
That literally, it was on the tip of my tongue and I laughed as you said it, because that's what everyone always says. It's like, oh, it's such a melting pot. Like, you can't move for having heard like somebody say that. And you're right, they do take their New Yorkness very seriously.
Yeah, and I think the opposite side of that is more like what we have in the UK, which is the mosaic way of doing things. So, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, but I actually quite enjoy the fact that we can keep a lot of our individual cultural traditions and beliefs and still be a part of the wider society. I used to joke, right, and say to people in London, especially, you could walk around in pink hair, no one would care, because individuality is very respected, I think, in the UK.
And I think more than that, we also celebrate difference.
Yeah, being weird is cool.
Yeah, but going back to your melting pot versus mosaic, I think one of the biggest differences is we don't swear allegiance to like the flag of America the way the Americans do every day at school.
Yeah.
And I know that there is this sense of a Britishness and a British culture, but like you say, what that means to people is very different and very individual. And I would be hard pressed to encapsulate what it means to be British.
I mean, this is why we have this season, right? Because I think even though we are very much living here, it is something it's not tangible, I think. And I do know that in the citizenship ceremony, you do have to pledge either an oath or there's a difference. I think one of them you pledge allegiance, the other one it's an oath.
To the monarch of the day.
Yeah. Okay. And I mean, I never had to do it. So, and I think I'm ashamed to say I don't think I know all the words to the anthem. I know. I think if I hear the music and people start singing, then I'll catch on to it. But just off the back of my head now, I don't think I can recite it.
Shame on you.
Well,
so you spoke about citizenship. Have you seen the tests to become a citizen?
I was gonna come to that because I don't think I can pass it.
I can't pass it. And as you said, I'm a British national. Like, I was born and raised in this country. I am actually very into history. But I could not pass that.
Let me throw you some sample questions. I don't have the answers.
How is
But
that?
let's see if our listeners, I'll find the answers, but let's see if our listeners can pass this. So number one, how tall is the London Eye? You have four choices: 282 feet, 373 feet, 443 feet, or 552 feet.
So firstly, sorry, I will try and attempt to answer the question in a minute, but isn't it so British that it's in feet and not meters? Because loads of people don't understand imperial. Okay, so there's how many feet in a yard? There's 3 feet in a yard.
Yes.
A foot is 12 inches. I know that.
Yes. There's
12
about 3.3 in a meter.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, that's it. Okay.
I mean, it's a wild guess.
I don't know because I have no spatial awareness. You know this.
Me too. I can't tell the distance of anything.
I also, disclaimer, have never been up the London Eye because I feel like that's the ultimate tourist, like, cringe thing.
Okay, we've got to go.
No, we haven't. Why do I need to go?
Actually, I didn't really enjoy it because I don't like being in a small confined space with a bunch of strangers over great height. So that was literally my worst nightmare. Because I was thinking, what if it got stuck?
It does sometimes.
Or what if someone farts inside? You're trapped.
Oh, okay.
Okay, next.
But no, well, do you know what we should do? Dinner in
one.
the sky. Sorry, I'm sidebar.
We should.
That is very fun. I have done that.
Okay.
The
I'll
food's
tell you the
not great.
answer.
Okay,
just
tell
actually,
me.
you know what? We'll post the answers in the Instagram post. We'll keep a bit of mystique.
Oh,
So
okay. You can just tell me later.
Another question. When what? Sakyuddin Muhammad opened the first curry house in the UK?
What are my options?
1780, 1810, 1880, and 1940.
Can I go for like 1840?
That's not one of the options.
Oh, sorry. What did you? No, sorry. It was 1940 or 1810.
Or 1880.
Can I go for 1880?
Okay, I'll reveal it to you later. I'll just throw you a couple more. Which flower is associated with Wales? This you must know. You must know.
I do know, and it's really annoying because I love flowers. I do know it's on the tip of my tongue, and I can like visualize.
Think about when they play rugby.
Rugby.
Yeah.
Yeah. The roses.
I said rugby in weirdly northern way. Rugby. I don't know why it came out like that.
No, wait, hang on. I do know this. We have the roses, and they have. I'm thinking about the Six Nations.
Keep thinking about it. I'll throw you another one.
I don't even get any like 4 options.
Okay, sorry, you do. You've got the daffodil. You've got
there
rose.
you go. Yes, that there you go. That's it.
Okay, fine. Okay, you're a historian.
Don't say it like that.
So you're an historian. Did I say it right?
No, I just meant more like I'm not really a historian.
I know. What does the York Minster have? Stained wood, stained limestone, stained glass, or stained bricks?
I mean, I have been to the York Minster, so I should be able to answer this. It's also where Ellie Goulding got married, by the way, just FYI. Sorry, I just throw that in.
That's good info.
This is what I mean, where like on any given day, I probably could tell you the answer to all of these things.
Right, but put on the spot. But that's the thing. So people need to know, right? I think you need to get 75% in this citizenship test. I'm not sure, actually. I think it's pretty long.
And it's timed, right?
24 questions. You need to get 18 right.
That's not a lot of questions, but that's a high like percentage for pass.
I mean, it costs £50. So
can you take it unlimited number of times, or do you fail it? Okay.
I think you can. But it's hard. I really don't think I can pass it. Having said that, one of my friends was doing their driving test and they had, the app.
Yeah.
I didn't pass it. Because another interesting fact, I took my exam in Hong Kong, and because Hong Kong has a pretty similar road system to here, I was able to just convert because we drive on the same side and most of the signs are the same. However, in Hong Kong, I don't get some of the warning signs, like with hail and things. I don't get them because we don't get them in Hong Kong.
Well, of course, because you're not going to have extreme weather like that, are you?
Exactly. So when I saw them, I was like, no idea, and I didn't pass it. But I'm a good driver, actually.
Have you ever driven in the UK?
Yeah, quite often.
So I, like, as you know, have passed my driving test, but hate driving with a passion.
I love driving.
Which is why we're good road trip buddies.
We should plan one.
Yeah.
So, okay. I'm going to give you some stats now about immigration in the UK.
Okay.
And for listeners, I will post some of these questions. I think we can just post them on our Instagram and see how many people get. So, as of the year ending June 2021, people born outside the UK made up about 14.5% of the UK's population, which is quite a lot. And of those, non-EU people were the majority. I don't know if that's surprising or not.
So as a minority,
to
me, it's not that surprising.
We're a majority in something, hey?
Yeah. And also I think where you live in the country probably influences that.
So London, where we are, has almost half of that.
Yeah.
And guess what the most common country of origin is? India.
Frankly. I did know that.
Quite interestingly, actually, most of these non-EU migrants stated family or other reasons for coming here, whereas most EU migrants came for work.
Yes, because, I mean, I guess if you think when we were in the EU, the point was freedom of movement and be able to work in the borders, right? So,
and this is something, what I'm going to tell you next, this is something that sometimes I rage about. So the official classification of ethnicity.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Right, so this is according to the 2011 census, and I think Nehan and I both remember we were sent a census maybe in 2020. So they probably haven't finished. If they're using Excels, they're probably not done.
The Office for National Statistics, call Janice.
I am an Excel master. So according to the census, you've got white, which includes, you can do subcategories, English, Irish, Gypsy or Traveller, other. And actually this category forms 87% of our population, well, back in 2011. I don't think these numbers would have fluctuated that much, to be honest. Mixed race, which is 2% of the population. Asian or Asian British, which includes Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Chinese, or other. And we're 6.3%. And this is the one where I'm raging, because sometimes Chinese is put outside of the Asian bracket.
So what bracket are you in?
It's just Chinese, which I find interesting because, as far as I know, China is in Asia. But I've filled in forms where apparently I'm Chinese and not Asian.
So it's interesting though, isn't it? Like you and I talk about this quite a lot, right? When people are like, oh, I like Asian food. And I'm like, Asian food is a whole continent. And what they really mean, and again, depending on where you are in the world, I think when you're in America, they mean Pan-Asian as in
like pho, but like,
well, that, or it could be some combination of Chinese food, Thai food, Vietnamese food, Cambodian food, Laos, like
takeaway food.
Yes, but they aren't talking about my kind of Asian food.
No.
That's like, and so this is
But
the thing.
I'll tell you what, in my part of Asia, when we say Asia,
You mean,
we mean just our part. So places like Korea, Japan is part of Asia, but we are very specific when we refer to Southeast Asians, like
yes,
Southeast Asian countries, and also India is a
is a
different thing.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some political feel
yeah,
behind that, but I think here also when people mention Asian, it's like brown Asian, because
oh,
Chinese people get mentioned separately as Chinese people, but then
yeah,
I also get mistaken as, or rather, people bucket us into, my kind of Asian, which is could be Japanese, could be
mm.
Korean. So, I mean, I've
How do
been
you
called
feel
all
about the
things.
word Oriental?
Hmm. The silence says it all, I think.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Because then somebody said to me, they're like, what if I can't identify what country or origin the person is? What should I use? And I thought, well,
Asian.
yeah.
I mean, you do have Mandarin Oriental called that, but clearly that was named during colonial times.
I've got a great candle that smells just like that.
That scent does follow you. Yeah, so last but not least, you've got Black, African, Caribbean, or Black British, which is 3%. And that's another very interesting point coming back to the whole melting pot or mosaic thing. Of course, with the backdrop of slavery, all of that, I have noticed that our friends here are much clearer with I'm Nigerian, I'm Ghanaian.
Mm-hmm.
Like they have a specific route,
Mm-hmm.
even if they're third generation here.
Yeah.
Whereas in America, everyone's African American. I think
Yes.
they don't call out the countries as much.
Yes, and I think we touched on this when we did some BLM episodes
Yes.
in season 1, with our guests, with Larry, with
Mm.
Nefe, and it's like you say, I think probably in part down to historically
Mm-hmm.
the slave trade and the movement of people, the forced movement of people, and also the colonial ties, again, going back to what is now the Commonwealth, but the colonies.
Mm-hmm.
I think that those ties are still very strong.
Yeah. And I like that, because I think even in Chinese culture, being from Hong Kong, my kind of Chinese culture would be very different to someone from Sichuan, or from Shanghai. We have different dialects completely. So I like kind of hanging on to those bits of heritage. And speaking of, the whole reason for immigration, I think so. When and why did your family come to the UK?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So I think it's two slightly different things, from different
Mm.
sides of the family, from different places as well. So I guess on my dad's side, it was that post-war um idea that it was more prosperous and there were better opportunities
Mm.
here. And also just the desire to live and work abroad. Um, it was something that you saw people do, and
Mm-hmm.
therefore then it influenced other people to go and travel. There's a hilarious story, and I'll tell it you kind of over dinner one day of just how that kind of unfolded with my grandparents. But they were not the first in their family. My great grandfather also made a similar trip, tried to actually move to New York.
Mm-hmm.
Again, hilarious story. So that I guess it was passed down, that idea of living and working somewhere other than where you were born,
Mm.
and that's how they came to be. And then my dad was here, and we've grown up here. But yeah, primarily I guess work. I think I've
Mm.
said to you before, my grandmother was a nurse and then a midwife, and a lot of people that moved from former empires and Commonwealth countries came to fulfill jobs. And then the health sector is one that has always been heavily recruited by people of different countries. So that's kind of their story. And I guess on my mum's side, it was quite different. So I say this, I am Indian, but my mum is Zambian and my grandmother's Zimbabwean. And they moved from Zambia to the UK. As I said, my grandmother being a British passport holder was how they ended up here. But that was down to the laws in the country at the time necessitated that all children would have to do national service. And my mum's one of four, and she has two older sisters. And my grandfather didn't want his daughters to go and do national service in a country.
What did that pertain? Like, what kind of national service?
So I mean, again, I'm not super au fait, but I believe it would be, if you think about the countries today that have national service, or when we used to have it in the UK, it's basically being trained in readiness for the potential of being called up. So it does involve, actual military, like basic training, basically.
It's really advanced, actually, that women were also included.
Well, that and the militarization of the society. So also you've got to think about the backdrop against which you've got majority white rule is being abolished. Empire has ended. You've got a particularly fractious political system and a vacuum of power that's come to it. So it also probably wasn't the best time to be an Indian national in that situation. So yeah, that's how they ended up here. And I think people kind of quite often ask, I'm sort of very fortunate, all of my immediate family is all in the UK. And that's always been the case. That's all I've ever really known. We have lots of extended family around the world in various places, but all of my immediate family have always lived in the UK. So yeah, that's, I guess, the story in a nutshell.
So this being a huge topic, Neha and I thought that it would make more sense to do a two-parter because we want to do it justice. So we'll come back next week and continue then.
And I'll ask you about how you ended up in the UK and what brought you here. I'd also really like to talk about some of the more recent migration in history. So Windrush in particular, which has received a lot of coverage and attention in the last couple of years. So yeah, that's something I'd like to talk about.
Okay, so see you guys next week.
Subscribe, rate and review on your favourite podcast platform and follow us on Instagram at Culturally Speaking Podcast. You can also check out our website culturallyspeaking.co.uk for a transcript of this episode. Share your stories or your show ideas with us by sending us an email at theculturallyspeaking@gmail.com.